Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Moving Beyond QuickBooks with Business Process Automation. I'm Bob Shaga with Sage. Thank you for choosing to spend time with us today. Our agenda today is this. First, we'll look at business process automation and why it's important. Then we'll look at signs that you've outgrown QuickBooks for automating processes. I'll share with you a real-life example of a QuickBooks user who moved to Sage Intacct. I'll then show a demonstration on how you can easily automate business processes. Then I'll share with you the benefits that you can expect using Sage Intacct for business process automation. And lastly, we'll answer questions and let you know where you can find out more information. Let's get started. First, let's discuss what we mean by business process automation. And we'll use purchasing as an example. An invoice is received. It's checked to ensure it's legitimate and the bill is accurate, perhaps using 2- or 3-way match, and then it's routed for approval and payment. The invoice is then marked and paid and archived in case it's needed later. That's one example of a process. If you're using QuickBooks, invoice capture is a manual process. With QuickBooks, you create a new bill and then input all the needed information. QuickBooks organizes the data so you can see which vendors have been paid, the vendor detail, and a link to the AP aging report. But what it doesn't do is automate the process from the time you decide to purchase until the invoice is archived. Even though the invoice data is entered in QuickBooks, the invoice is manually routed for verification and payment, either via email or on paper. The biggest challenges are data entry, invoice to payment matching, and solving for lost or duplicate invoices. Instead, what if you could input the purchase requisition, automatically adding information stored in the system? Move the process forward through purchase order and receiver to the invoice, automatically moving data, and the transaction is editable at each stage. If it all looks good, then it's routed to the right approvers, paid, and archived, leaving an accessible history of the transaction. If something doesn't look right, say the quantity billed doesn't match the quantity received, or the unit price or tax is off, then the approver interrupts the process until the issue is resolved. With an automated process, you approve invoices faster, experience fewer errors, and increase productivity. Automating the process also cuts costs. The average all-in cost for processing a single invoice is around $15. That drops to around $2 when you automate the process. Now think about how many vendor invoices you process a month. If you're only dealing with a few invoices, then you can live with the pain and hidden costs associated with QuickBooks. But if you're processing hundreds of invoices every month, you end up spending hours and hours on this instead of more value-added analysis and decision-related activities. Purchasing is one of the many processes where QuickBooks falls short on automation. No matter how you slice it, manual processes are error-prone and time-consuming, and it makes it difficult to gain an integrated, real-time financial view of your company's end-to-end processes. So what are some of the signs you've outgrown QuickBooks? You have multiple entities. With QuickBooks, each entity requires its own instance. So there's no chance that you can streamline business processes to improve productivity, especially if you have 3 or more entities. Recently, we spoke to a former QuickBooks user in a company with 80 entities, and she said she spent 20% of her day just logging in and out of QuickBooks. Your chart of accounts is growing. As you add new accounts, there are workflows associated with each, and QuickBooks will not let you automate these. You're finding errors and spending a lot of time correcting these. Or worse, these errors went undiscovered for a while and ended up being major problems. Your team spends a week or more on each purchase approval or invoice. You're spending too much time printing, signing, mailing, and reconciling checks to vendors, or you're processing more than 200 invoices per month. Your bank reconciliations are so tedious and time-consuming that you only do them once a month, and you go weeks without knowing your actual cash position. One other telltale sign is how long it takes you to close. If you're using QuickBooks, you're doing the following manual tasks to close: consolidations, currency conversions, intercompany eliminations, revenue recognition, allocations and accruals for expenses, depreciations, amortizations, adjustments. These and other tasks are all signs that you've outgrown QuickBooks, and it's throttling your ability to share real-time financial data so you and other leaders in your organization can make strategic, data-driven decisions. You might be filling the gaps with spreadsheets, but spreadsheet errors are not a question of if, but when. And that can be a huge problem if errors go undetected for any length of time. Let me share with you a real-world example of a former QuickBooks user who switched to Sage Intacct. Dapple is a leading innovator and producer of non-toxic, hypoallergenic, and plant-based cleaning products for families with young children. The company's products can be found online and on shelves at Target, Walmart, Babies R Us, and many other leading U.S. and international retailers. Dapple used QuickBooks, but the company's rapid growth necessitated better visibility into its financial health. They wanted a system that could connect directly to any third-party warehouse or logistics provider for direct insight and control over the order fulfillment. This integration is something that QuickBooks does not provide. By switching to Sage Intacct, the company moved to a more robust platform. Now they could automate a bunch of financial processes, from purchasing and inventory management to accounts payable and receivable. Sage Intacct pulls data using EDI connections with Dapple's third-party logistics providers. These integrations save Dapple at least 40 hours each month from laboriously entering over 700 invoices into QuickBooks. Sage Intacct automatically collects sales and inventory data for these warehouses every 15 minutes. This speeds up invoicing and gives visibility into current inventory, unit costs, and other valuable data. In the words of Dapple CEO Jeremy Pertman, Sage Intacct has made a huge impact by reducing the time we spend on finance housekeeping and freeing us up to focus on things that are actually growing the business. Thanks to the real-time financial and operational visibility we now have in Sage Intacct, I can always see if we're meeting our forecasts, and I sleep better at night. Dapple also reported a payback in less than 2 months in terms of business value delivered. Let me show you how business process automation works in Sage Intacct. Let's move over to look at purchasing. Like order entry, we have an overview map that shows our workflow from requisition to purchase orders, receivers, and vendor invoices. I'll go ahead and create a purchase order. I'm just going to click on the purchase order icon to create this new purchase order. Know that if your main job revolves around purchasing, you can set this map as your home page at login. Our example company needs more stock, so I'm going to create a PO to buy items from Defender USA. I'm going to purchase 10 more of these Defender systems. I can see my extended price. As I create additional line items, the system will keep giving me line items to enter them on. Just like in order entry, I see the default vendor contacts and all the different controls. My header shows all the information from this transaction so far, with all my information entered. I'll post this purchase order. Some days go by and I receive the order from the vendor. Now I go to the purchase order and convert it to a receiver. Come to find out, the vendor's low on quantity. On my receiver, I note that I received 8 of these. I don't want to pay for 10 when I only got 8. With the receiver updated, I'm going to post it. I can now convert this receiver to a vendor invoice. I see that everything is in here the way I expected it to be. I can see the vendor document number and post that with the vendor invoice. Now I have the vendor invoice posted in purchasing, but it did something else. It went over to accounts payable and it created a bill. So now if I go look at my bills in accounts payable, I see that I have this new bill to Defender USA. I can choose the bill and see everything that's on it. Now it's keeping track of account and amount rather than item and quantity. This is going to fall nicely into my chart of accounts and hit the general ledger. I've still got all the information about the bill, and from here I can select bills to pay and move my payment process forward. On the back end, where I need to distribute indirect costs or revenues across departments, locations, or some other dimension, like a product or a project, allocations let me set up automated allocation journal entries to properly allocate periodic expenses and revenues that run automatically. With these allocations set up and running, I get a clear view of the true performance of my organization without having to run complex calculations in spreadsheets. Sage Intacct's built-in approval processes let me set approval requirements on bills waiting to be paid. I can even set up approvals on a requisition before the purchase process gets too far down the road. Approval can be set by dollar amount, by department, or by individual approvers. You can choose to have one approver at a certain dollar amount and then 2 or 3 approvers at a higher dollar amount. Approval notices get sent out to the approvers automatically, and they can approve with a mobile device. And you're not left playing find the manager to get purchases approved. So what are the benefits of using Sage Intacct as compared with QuickBooks? Business process automation reduces errors and improves accuracy, cutting costs and saving time. Integration with other business applications and business partners allows for the bidirectional sharing of information. So like DAPL, you can better manage your supply chain and transactions with trading partners. When it comes to procurement and order management, you can automate up to 90% of these processes. Through automation, you can potentially cut hours down to minutes. Your team can dedicate the additional time to helping the business reach its larger goals and planning for the future. You can also automate reconciliations with ease, regardless of the number of entities. Sage Intacct connects over 10,000 financial institutions worldwide to give your team an accurate, up-to-date picture of your cash. This lets you make investment decisions in hours rather than days and spot the potential for poor cash flow before your company begins to feel its effects. Easy matching and reconciliation mean you can soft close cash daily and can provide business leaders with accurate and current cash positions to make critical decisions in the moment. But most importantly, automation gives you and the entire finance team more time to be strategic. Get your life back as Sage Intacct does the heavy lifting. This way you can spend more time on financial analysis and less time doing bookkeeping. So let's get to some questions. Can you give some other examples of processes that can be automated? Sure. So I picked purchasing because every organization has bills to pay. I also mentioned order management, which is similar in automation to purchasing. Here's another example. We have a contracts module that helps you automate billing, revenue recognition, forecasting, and metrics in companies with subscriptions or mixed element arrangements. This eliminates painful workarounds that we often do manually for things like subscriptions and deferred revenue management. It also helps with customers who have a direct sync to their CRM like Salesforce. It speeds up the order to cash cycle and automates those complex billing issues. Another question, automation sounds great, but how do we move toward automation since our processes are completely manual? This is an excellent point. Automation isn't something you just turn on. You have to look at your processes today and map out how these work, and then see if there's areas for improvement. I should also mention that at Sage Intacct, we're making significant investments in artificial intelligence and machine learning. These will help enhance our platform. We have a group within Sage, the Sage Artificial Intelligence Lab, or SAIL, that's focused solely on developing and embedding AI and machine learning across the entire portfolio of Sage products and services.